On Friday night, we put the money in the blue box. The blue box donated to Israel and plants trees and Bluebell's playground.
To me, JNF means our tzedakah towards a brighter future for Israel.
Continuity, sustainability, community, and giving back.
Involvement, participation.
JNF to me is the main link I have with Israel.
To me, JNF means establishment and connection.
I think about history. I think about projects.
JNF plays a role by being, in many ways, the custodian of looking after the land, protecting it.
You know, Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. We finally have it, and we're nurturing it and we're supporting it. It's a place for everybody in the diaspora to have a place, to have a home.
Being so far away, I just know that by being involved in something like JNF, my connection is being maintained and I'm able to stay updated, I'm able to support Israel.
It's the place where I was born, it's where I've got most of my family. And if you look at Israel today and what it's achieved through, you know, from innovation all the way to the fence, it stands as a true testament to what we as the Jewish people can really achieve.
Whatever we do, we must be involved with Israel in some form. And so I think we should all be part of it and enjoy it together. I can only suggest that if anybody gets involved with JNF, that he will only be the winner.
If we can, then we should support financially. But there are many who can write, there are many who can visit, there are many who can talk, there are many who can pack boxes, there are many who can walk around with that very famous blue box. Everybody has to give and contribute in whatever way they can.
I think we all know that when we give to something, to people who are less fortunate, who don't have something, I think we all know what that feeling is, that emotion.
The money that people put in a blue box is very, very important. It goes to practical, specific projects which JNF very carefully chooses.
The next generation, it represents the future of Israel, and we can't be complacent, we can't sit back. We have to continue to teach them so they understand our history and how important it is that we continue to support Israel for generations to come.
I'm a bit dumb. My mummy's going to take me to Israel.
Good evening, everyone. We are really pleased you have been able to join JNF tonight to get a better understanding of the Israeli legal system and how it relates to the Malka Leifer case. My name is Yigal Nisell. I'm the JNF Education Shaliach. I was practicing lawyer in Israel before entering my shlichut, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to take a deeper look into the legal processes that have brought us to where we are today with this particular case. I think it's worthwhile to mention a few points as we begin. Because we are speaking about a legal proceeding that is currently active both here and in Israel, it's important that we will note that we will not be discussing the alleged crime relating to Malka Leifer case specifically. Rather, we will be looking at the Israeli legal system and the predicted process going forward from here. I also want to note that tonight's discussion will not highlight any specific religious group, affiliation, or political agenda. This is not the focus of tonight's discussion. Why has it taken so long? This evening, we are going to discuss the timeline of events and activities which has led us to this current proceedings. On Tuesday, the 26th of May, 2020, an Israeli court ruled that Malka Leifer is mentally fit to stand trial for extradition to Australia, where she faces 74 charges of child sexual abuse. I would like to welcome and thank our guest this evening, Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, and Dassi Erlich. Welcome. Fleur grew up in Gibraltar and studied law at King's College, London University. Fleur immigrated to Israel in 2001. In May 2016, Fleur became a city councillor in Jerusalem, and in February 2017, the leader of the opposition. In November 2018, Fleur was re-elected to the Jerusalem Municipal Council and was appointed Deputy Mayor of Foreign Relations, Economic Development and Tourism. Fleur is involved in the progressing of women's rights and marginalized population groups. Dassi and her sisters have been immersed in the Israeli legal system since 2014 as they fight to bring Malka Leifer back to Australia, where she faces 74 charges of sexual abuse. Welcome to you both, and thank you in advance for your insights and time. Before I hand over to Dassi and Fleur, let me give you a quick overview of the current Extradition Act that is in place between Israel and Australia. Israel had chosen to sign extradition agreement with several countries around the world. There are many countries Israel had chosen not to partner with because of the difference in the legal systems, and once they do not have diplomatic relationship with. The State of Israel has an extradition treaty with 40 European Union countries, as well as with United States, Australia, Canada, the Fiji Islands, Switzerland, and South Africa. This extradition treaty only relates to active criminal charges, where the potential sentence is a minimum of 1 year in prison. Israel has two distinct conditions attached to the extradition treaty between themselves and any other country. One, the accused must be a citizen of Israel. Number two, if a prison sentence is imposed after conviction, in the requesting country, the accused must have the option to serve the sentence in Israel. As I said, we need to bear in mind that from 1976, Australia and Israel have an extradition treaty in place. Like any agreement, there are clauses that nullify the agreement. For example, if the suspect is unfit to stand trial, the agreement is not enacted. Remember, unfit. Tonight, I will start by leading the conversation with Fleur and Dassi. You will find a chat board on your screen. Please do not hesitate. If you have any questions for Dassi or Fleur towards the end of the session, I will open the floor to answer any question, time permitting. This will be a good time to welcome Dassi to the conversation. Dassi, would you mind giving the audience the legal timeline as it relates to this case?
Sure, thanks, Yigal. It's so nice to be on a panel, I just want to say, with Fleur. We met her a couple of years ago, and since then she's been a very passionate supporter of our cause. So it's nice to be on a panel with her. In regards to the timeline, so we start in the year 2000 when Malka Leifer first came to Australia. And then if we jump straight to 2008, when Malka Leifer fled Australia with the help of the school board after the allegations surfaced, my sisters and I gave our police statements in 2011. And that's where the 74 charges were drawn up. And we were told at the time by the police that, you know, extradition, the paperwork had to go through Canberra, and extradition will probably happen within the next year. And we followed. We heard updates from Canberra that the paperwork was being worked through and was being sent to Israel. And I believe that the paperwork was sent to Israel with the request for extradition in 2012. And for a long time, we didn't hear anything. We kept requesting information, and we were just told we don't know what's happening if the case is in Israel. And for the most part, I think my sisters and definitely myself put the case to the back of my mind. In 2014, and I still remember this day, I was traveling in Europe with my sister Erlich, and my sister Nicole pulled me up and said, Dassi, Malka Leifer has been arrested in Israel. It's exploded all over the news. Everyone's reporting it. And we were shocked. No one had told us that this was happening. So we called the police in Australia and we asked them why didn't you tell us that this was happening? And they said actually they didn't know that it was happening. Since then, they've been a lot more informed about the process. So in 2014, we started these extradition hearings that have got us to court hearing 67. And the first couple of hearings were literally just about whether or not there would be a media gag on the case, and there was one, and then it was appealed and it was lifted, and where Malka Leifer was going to sit while the extradition proceedings happened. And it was decided that she would be allowed to go home, but she would have to be under house arrest with the condition that she turn up at the court hearings. So we're up to court hearing, I think, number 7 by this point, and Malka Leifer is home under house arrest, and she's supposed to turn up at a court hearing. And of course, she doesn't turn up. And so the court hearing is adjourned. And this happens probably 6 or 7 times. And every time we're getting the report back from Israel, Malka Leifer didn't turn up at the court hearing. Apparently, she was checking herself into hospital a couple of days before the hearing, saying that she was medically unwell and couldn't attend the court, and then checking herself out of hospital a day or 2 after the court had been adjourned. So we were quite aghast. Like, how was she getting away? This was clear game playing. How was she getting away with it? And when my sisters and I traveled to Israel in 2015, we met with the Ministry of Justice and we said to them, what's happening here? And they promised us that they weren't going to give up. They were going to ensure that even if they had to take the court to the hospital, they would make sure that Leifer saw a judge and this extradition proceeding started. Of course, that never happened. The hearings continued like they had been going on before, and we get up to court hearing, 14 or 15, and by this time we're up to 2016, and the judge decides, instead of expecting Malka Leifer to ever turn up at a court hearing, he's going to suspend the case. And that's what he does. And there was quite an uproar at the time. But for the most part, Malka Leifer was allowed to live freely. The only expectation that she had on her was that she needed to see her doctor once a month and go in front of a psychiatric panel every 6 months. And that was the only expectation that was put on her. So she comes in front of a psychiatric panel, which she did attend because she had to, but her family comes with her, and her family are saying, oh, she's so sick, and they describe her like a sack of potatoes. That's the words that they use. She's so unwell that she can't actually get out of bed. She can't take care of her basic living needs. She needs a carer for her daily living needs. And that continues on for the next year and a half in front of the panel. And this happens at the beginning of 2018. She sees a panel. And again, her family say, oh, we need a medical power of attorney. She's so unwell. And unbeknown to them, this is when I had begun telling my story, and Shana Aronson from Jewish Community Watch, now Magen, had organized the private investigation. The police had taken it on, and they had been following her, and they knew that she wasn't this sick. And several days later, after that panel, she was arrested. So now we're in 2018, and we're up to, I think, court date 25 by that point. And the next probably 20 or 30 hearings were about a few different things. One, where she was going to sit while the extradition proceedings happening. So there was bail hearings and appeals, and she was let on bail, and then that was overturned. We had to deal with the charges of her fraud, and they decided to drop those charges because they didn't want to delay the extradition, and then decide whether or not she was mentally fit or not. And so there were many different reports made. Leifer was still claimed to be mentally unfit, and her lawyers were claiming to be, the state was claiming that she was fit. They had to cross-examine all those lawyers. There was back and forth between the district psychiatrist. The whole Litzman scandal blew up. And there were many different court hearings until finally the last panel came back with the news that she was fit to stand trial. And that's where we've got to this point where the judge has now taken on that panel's ruling, and Leifer is fit to stand trial.
Well, Dassi, thank you for that clarity. I can only imagine what a stressful time this has been for you and your sisters. Fleur has followed this timeline closely as an advocate and advisor for Dassi and her sisters. Fleur, can we start with why have you chose to support Dassi and her sisters? Because as I understand, you didn't know Dassi before, and you didn't have really a direct connection to Australia. Fleur, please turn on the microphone.
Sorry, hi. That's right. Apart from the fact that I'm one of the only English-speaking, mother tongue English-speaking politicians in the country, I didn't have any other particular connection. I like to get involved when I see an injustice. I am one of those people that always likes to get involved to see how I can help. We have a mutual friend called Adam Yigal, who's really been a fantastic representative for Dassi and her sisters here in Israel. He's somebody that I've known for a few years, and he sat down with me a couple of years ago and he said, Fleur, there's a really important case. I'd heard about it, but I hadn't paid attention to all the detail. I knew it was something to really be embarrassed about in terms of the state of Israel, something that was happening. So he asked me to get involved. He asked me to try and help advocate within other politicians in the government. And of course, I jumped at the chance because I really thought that they were getting a very raw deal from the government here. And unfortunately, the wheels of justice certainly weren't working very well or working fast enough. And so once I was asked to get involved, I met with Dassi and her sisters. They came to Israel. There was a conference that was held, and I spoke at the conference. And I spoke about the fact that there's something which is inherently wrong if a woman facing these allegations can play the system for so many years and get away with it. I'm not saying in Israel, we're very proud that we have a country of law and order. We're very proud that we have a country which is fully democratic in every way. But there must be something wrong with the wheels of justice when a person like this can abuse the system for her benefit and evade facing justice for so many years. And as somebody who'd been trained as a lawyer and somebody who has a natural empathy with the diaspora, because that's where I come from. I moved to Israel 19 years ago. Somebody who's English speaking, somebody who connected on a personal level, on a level of female empowerment with Dassi and her sisters, then I felt that I had to get more involved and use my platform and any other platform that I could facilitate in order to try and get things moving. And that's what I've tried to do. It's not been easy. I've always been I've said to Dassi from the beginning, and I truly believe that justice will be done. Unfortunately, it's too slow. And, when you're talking about the legal system, it's not just what the final result is, it's the process. And when the victims of a crime like this have to suffer so much to be heard and to get the process moving and bring foreign governments involved, there's something that we need to improve in our system. The second thing we need to improve in our system, and it's less of a case here with Malka Leifer, but in general, is that we cannot be a country that is a shelter for people who commit these crimes and run away because we are generous enough to have the law of return, to let every Jew into our country. Of course, that's the founding basis of our country. But again, the founding basis of our country cannot be abused by escaping pedophiles from the entire world to find shelter here just because they happen to be Jewish. And so now that we have a government, I really want to work hard to advance, to first of all do I've already spoken to the head of the Aliyah and Klita, of the Aliyah and Absorption Committee in the Knesset. I want to have a special committee session on how to avoid people evading justice from abusing the system and Israel's laws. And that's something that we really have to have a very, very deep discussion within Israel. How do we stop these people? And of course, how do we have a situation if this happens again? This is ridiculous. We're almost 70 hearings and 6 years, 5 years, and this woman escaped, of course, in 2008. And so we have to figure out how to make things better for extradition hearings and how to stop people abusing the system because they can.
Thank you, Fleur. Just another question following what you just said. What was the reaction from the government of Israel, ministers, member of the Knesset, citizens of Israel regarding this case?
I think there were, I mean, Dassi probably can answer this question better than me because she really went minister by minister. I went to the people I knew, of course, within my own party. But I think the reaction is one of sympathy and empathy for the majority. But you know what it's like in politics. Some people have their own agenda. It's not the top of this one's priority, that one's priority, unless people really feel it. And I think that Dassi can answer the question, but I think she did find people that were really sympathetic and really wanted to help. And then, of course, politics gets in the way and other agenda items get in the way. And so I think that in general, people are embarrassed by this. The politicians I've spoken to are like, well, this should not be happening. But from that to getting somebody to make this the kind of flagship issue is a whole other issue.
Okay, thank you, Fleur. We'll come back to you shortly. Dassi, on to you. There have been obviously a lot of criticism about handling this case. But I want to ask you a different question. I want to ask you, can you share some positive stories about the level of support you have received from both Israeli community and, of course, as well, back home?
Sure. I think, like Fleur said, we met with many different people in Israel on a political level, on an organizational level. We met so many different people, and for the most part, people have been so welcoming, wanting to do whatever they can to help, wanting to go out of their way to raise awareness about this issue in Australia and in Israel. It took some time. I think there was quite a resistance at first. People didn't feel like, when I first started the campaign, how they can be Zionistic and understand that every country has its flaws. But once people kind of got on board and realized that this was so wrong, they couldn't be silent about it. We have received tremendous support, you know, from the people that we've stayed in Israel, discounting our accommodation because they know that we're staying there to fight for justice there, to people like Fleur turning up at every court hearing. And we just have this amazing group of people that have stood with us and have turned up at court hearing after court hearing and allowed us to, and been the eyes and ears for us, so that if we're not there, we knew what was going on. And it's what has allowed us to keep going.
And from home, have you got support?
Like I was saying, it took a while for the Australian community to get on board, but once they did, the community has really come behind us. Okay.
Before moving on to Fleur, I just want to remind, if you have, everyone who's looking now in this webinar, watching us, if you have any questions, you have the chat board, don't be shy, ask the questions. Going forward to you, Fleur, as we know, now in May, Malka Leifer, the court decided that she's fit to stand for extradition trial. As a qualified lawyer, not only as a politician, and also a person that deeply knows the legal system in Israel, what do you think going to happen now? What is the next step? What is Malka Leifer lawyers' options to do now? What is the next step? Let's say they're going to decide, the court, that she is going to be extradited to Australia. Are she going to go in the next plane to Australia? What is the legal steps from here? Microphone again. Fleur, microphone again.
Unfortunately, we're not there yet, even though we are getting closer. So the next step is that there's an extradition hearing on July the 20th. And of course, the lawyers will want to appeal at every stage. So they'll want to appeal the decision that was taken by the court, finally, that she's fit to stand trial. So they'll want to appeal that. They'll want to appeal, if, please God, when we win that she is extradited, they'll want to appeal that too. question is, when will they be doing all the appeals? When I was in court last week, as Dassi knows, and at the time, the lawyer said we're going to wait for the extradition hearing and then we're going to appeal for both at the same time. I think now they've changed their minds and they may appeal now. I mean, the date is set for the extradition hearing. They're going to try and throw everything at this because they're now towards the end, and whatever they don't do now, they won't be able to do. But what's interesting is that when we were in court, they got up and they said, well, we don't know what we're going to do next because we have to sort out the matter of payment. So it turns out that I'm not sure if they've got arrears, that the family of Malka Leifer have not paid their fees. They said we may not be the people representing her in the appeals hearing. So something's going down in terms of the Malka Leifer defense team, which I think is a great sign because it just means that they realize that they may be losing, and therefore if they're getting donations, the donations are drying up. If they're obviously losing momentum of support amongst the religious leaders. You know, we had at the beginning really respected religious leaders in Israel coming out in her favor until we got in touch with them and they understood that this was going to tarnish their reputation because they were defending somebody who allegedly had done horrible things and eventually will be found guilty of these acts. And so at the moment, the best thing that is happening is that we have an extradition date, a trial date for the 20th of July. I'm assuming that they will try and appeal beforehand. I'm not sure if they've gotten their defense team woes sorted out. So at the moment, we're full speed ahead for the extradition trial, and we'll see whether the appeals will come before or after or both.
So after the extradition trial, let's say they say that she will be extradited. As I understand, they can also they can appeal about that. So what happened after that?
But very quickly, the appeal can be completely ignored or set aside. And also, what I think Dassi and I both feel from when we were here, when we were in high court. I have a lot of faith in the Israeli high court system, in the appeals courts. They won't let this thing drag out too long. We saw that they tried to appeal when we appealed. They were basically at one point a few months ago. She was given permission to go home, pending the next trial. And we appealed it and we won. And I think that what I found in the High Court is that people understand that this woman and her defenders and her enablers have been playing the system, the bureaucracy of the system, and they were having none of it. So I actually have a lot of faith that we won't see another 3 years go by, that this will be something that once we get to the July date, we will be able to see the extradition order very quickly after that. Maybe again, I'm being very optimistic, but I do feel that this is something which is now accelerating.
And after the trial, what is the next step? So the trial decide, the court decide that she's extradited. What is the next step?
Well, if they appeal, there'll have to be an appeal.
After the appeal?
If the High Court says this appeal hearing is not worth anything, we're throwing it out, just the police from Australia, I understand, will come and take her away. And then the trial in your country. Because
as I understand, there's well, that's the technical part. But also I understand the Minister of Justice needs to sign, right?
Yeah, the Minister of Justice needs to sign, but normally the Minister of Justice normally gives the stamp on the trial that has already been held. I don't see that this Minister of Justice or any Minister of Justice that would have come in would use his or her influence to delay especially a process which has taken so long, and nobody can cast any doubts on the veracity of the trial of the judge's decision because it's taken so long. Nobody can say, oh, this was done fast and this wasn't considered and that wasn't considered. This has been spread out, intolerably spread out. And so I don't see any any reason to worry about the Justice Minister. Having said that, we should now try and lobby the Justice Minister for him to understand what has happened here, how the wheels of justice have worked very, very slowly, which is part of the ultimate justice. And I don't foresee any challenges with the minister, but he needs to understand this case more intricately, and we need to be able to do we need to do the lobbying now.
To support your statement now about the Minister of Justice, I watched a few weeks ago a JNF webinar with the former Minister of Justice, Shaked, and it was a question: if she was the Minister of Justice, would she sign it? And she said yes. Maybe questions to you, Dassi. Do you feel that this support will come from the same Minister of Justice now, the new Minister of Justice? Or
I would say I don't see why not. I think somebody asked him about this recently. He said if it comes to his desk, he'll sign. If it's the recommendation of the court, which is a ruling of the court, it's just to give you an example, a parallel example. When the extradition of a Russian hacker came up for trial, the extradition hearing was held. He was allowed to be extradited to America. And then we had the Naama, the case of Naama, the young Israeli woman who was caught in Russia. Naama, I forgot her name. Anyway, she was caught in Russia, and the Russians came and they said, if you cancel the extradition of this hacker to the States, because he's Russian, there was rumors that they were trying to make a deal with the state of Israel about Naama's freedom and parallel it to the hacker that had already been through an extradition hearing. And Israel, quite rightly, said the extradition hearing has happened. This is not up for negotiation. The extradition hearing came to a decision. And so if in that case, where there was essentially a woman caught in a hostage situation in a foreign country, and the extradition hearing was still signed with all this political pressure coming, I don't foresee please God, any problems with the Minister for Justice signing a very straightforward extradition, which has a record of years of fighting it out in court, and please God, coming to the right conclusion in the end.
Thank you. Dassi, do you feel the same? Do you feel that the Minister of Justice will sign it? We can't hear you. Put your microphone.
I do. I have faith that when it gets to that point, that the Minister of Justice will sign off on it.
Okay. Fleur, I have one more question to you. In this point, we have, as you know, like I said, the extradition treaty between Australia and Israel has been very rarely activated. Okay, from the beginning, from 1976, and there's no really similar case to this. Do you feel that this have been more difficult because of that reason? Have been more difficult for Israel to decide of this Malka Leifer extradition? Microphone again. Maybe keep the microphone on.
Just keep it on. I don't know whether that's a factor. I've got to be honest. Look, of course, if there were multiple extradition hearings to Australia every year, the things might have been smoother, perhaps. But it's not been the case. It's not about the extradition hearing. It was about the fitness for trial hearing for extradition. That was really the linchpin. And this woman, again, abused the system. I also feel there was an element of inertia from the Israeli authorities at the beginning. I mean, if Dassi and Fleur made their statements in 2011, why did they just let her live a life with visiting a psychiatrist once a week? These are very, very serious allegations of real damage. And so I don't know whether if there would have been more extraditions to Australia, things would have worked faster. My feeling is that there was a certain amount of inertia by the authorities. There's no reason why Dassi had to go to JCW in order for them to find the evidence to bring her back to trial. That's ridiculous that it had to be a private initiative, that the authorities should have been on it. So perhaps there is that factor, but the abuse of the system by the Malka Leifer team, I think abuse of the bureaucracy, abuse of the court time, as really is something which I think is the main factor for where we are.
Just quickly, have you seen any policy changes because of this case in Israel?
We haven't had a government for a year, so hopefully we're going to be. I want to get into the idea of people escaping. There's a lot of, I hear all the time of child abusers escaping. JCW, which is now Magen, have done a lot of work with people running away from America and Canada and Europe and coming here free and continuing to abuse children. This is not acceptable. We're not a shelter for pedophiles, and this is something that we need to legislate on.
Fleur, I have a feeling that one day we will see you in the Knesset, and I hope that one day you will be involved in the justice system as well. Okay, moving on to Dassi. You and your sisters started a movement called Bring Leifer Back. Can you share with the audience about the purpose of this movement? And as well, have you received any financial support for that?
So before I answer your question, I just wanted to add to what Fleur was saying in regards to the extradition process and it being about the fitness to stand trial rather than the actual extradition. We were told that there was actually that this mental fitness had never been tried in an extradition court. So while it would have been dealt differently in a local case, it was all new for the extradition court. So everything was being worked out as it happened. And in a way, our case was the guinea pig for these types of cases being heard. So I hope that the law learns a lot of lessons, especially the extradition law learns a lot of lessons from this case. And then this can never happen again. But in regards to the Bring Leifer Back case, I mean, I think our goals have changed over the case. We started the case knowing that Malka Leifer was living a free life and knowing that she was able to abuse other people, and the reports were coming that was possibly happening. So we wanted to make sure that she couldn't hurt anybody else, and that was a big goal at the beginning. Now she's safely in jail, and I think the goal of the campaign has changed because the fact that the case has become so high profile and the awareness has grown so much has really exposed the systemic cover-up of what happens when people use power and wealth to abuse the vulnerable people and then to cover it up and have the help to do so. And this case has really, the more we talk about this case and the more that this case exposes, we're able to see all those mechanisms and bring them to light so that people don't feel like they can abuse the vulnerable and get away with it. And that's a huge goal of our campaign now, as well as obviously seeing justice. But I think that has changed over time.
And financial support, have you gained anything for starting that movement?
So my sisters and I funded the campaign ourselves, but more recently we have got financial support with flights to Israel, which has been hugely helpful. And like I said before, we've had help from people in regards to accommodation and things that we've done with the campaign.
Okay, amazing. Dassi, how is the Australian government helping you? Are they giving you any advice? Are they in contact with you? Something?
So I met, the first person I met was Ted Bailey, and I remember him telling me back then in 2017 that there will come a day, and I couldn't imagine it then, that if someone, in the political space doesn't support you, it won't look good for them. And then I think that that's the case. I think that, every single person that we met with Malcolm Turnbull, who promised to take it up in Israel, and he did. Dan Andrews has been a great help. He has taken up in Israel on every opportunity that he can. And every politician that we have met across the board in Australia has raised it with their Israeli counterparts. And we've heard from the Israeli politicians when we visited them that, that they've heard about this from everyone that's visited Israel. So Australia has made it very clear that they're not going to let this case go, that this is important and they want to see it happen.
Okay, and we also, of course, saw Dave Sharma in the parliament a couple of months ago. Okay, I would like to close this formal part of discussion with the question we all been keeping asking ourselves: why has this process taken so long? And I want Dassi, I want you to start, and if you can give us a bit of, a personal thought. Why is it taking so long?
I think I touched on this before, but I think that there has been a belief for a long time that people feel if they have the right connections or they belong to the right community or they have the money or the power, that somehow they can get away with what they're doing. And unless people fight back or raise awareness about that, it continues to happen. And I really feel that if we hadn't started the Bring Leifer Back campaign and had the support, that Malka Leifer would still be living a life free to do as she pleases and possibly hurting other people. So, I mean, it's the fact that people feel like they can get away with it, and they have, and they continue unless people put the light on that and raise awareness. And that's why that's why I believe it's taken so long.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that we can't ignore the fact that in certain sectors of society, especially ultra-Orthodox society, these things are wiped under the carpet because it doesn't look good on the community. Okay, and I think that what the Malka Leifer case has done is has given courage to a lot of people living in these communities, much more closed communities, that they couldn't speak out to say, I can speak out now. And this is why this has been such an important case. And I have to say, since I met Dassi and her sisters, it was so important to them from the beginning. They were looking less for justice for themselves and more for getting these predators off the street. And that's what impressed me about them, that for them, it was not about vengeance on the woman that had hurt them, but it was more about getting these predators off the street. And that's why I was very, very, drawn to them and their message, because their message is nobody should go through what we've been through. And this is something which is extremely important. And I think that we're living in an era where I agree with Dassi. I think this has shown that political power and community, resilience can help criminals get away. The community wraps yourself around you. They protect you. They don't really care about the truth, because what they care about is how the community looks to the outside world. And I think the fact that we've gone through the Me Too movement and the fact that we've got the Jeffrey Epstein thing, which just happened, okay? And the fact that we're seeing people with a lot of power, a lot of money, Weinstein, the people that you'd never tightened, people that you'd never imagined, now have to face the music for abusing. I think that this has been, we're in a new era, and I think that Dassi and her sisters have brought this new spirit to the Jewish community and to the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, which are used to keeping things in. And I think it's very important, because in Israel, in Jerusalem, we've had, about 4 months ago, we had 2 girls throwing themselves off a building in suicide because they were abused and they couldn't tell anybody. This is happening every single day in Israel. And what they've been doing is putting a spotlight and giving hope to other children and other families that are going through this, that they don't have to suffer silently. And that is incredibly important.
Now I was before without the microphone. So thank you, Fleur. I think that we're so lucky to have you also as Israeli, but also the people of Australia. I was so lucky to have you active in this case. Now we come to the questions time, and I just want to say that we have a couple of hundreds people are watching this this webinar, and we have more than I think 100 questions asked. So I'm sorry already. I'm telling you, all of you are watching. I'm really sorry we can't ask all the questions, but I will try to ask some of it. So first of all, I want to choose. Well, okay, this is the question. Jessica is asking Fleur, how much did Litzman delay the process? Should there not be a separation between the executive and the judges' system?
First of all, there is separation of the system. The allegations against Litzman, I have to say allegations because they haven't been proven yet. The allegations against Litzman are that as the health minister or the deputy health minister, whatever he was at the time, he influenced the district psychiatrist to give an opinion that Malka Leifer was not fit to stand trial. That was the thing. So that's got nothing to do with the judges. That's a government minister imposing an opinion on the allegations, the government minister imposing his desire for the outcome of a medical opinion that then has to be submitted to the courts. So he didn't call up the judge. The allegation is that he influenced the district psychiatrist. And this is one of the reasons why this has been delayed, because we've had opinions here, opinions there, more opinions, appealing these opinions, a different way of getting the opinions. It's been really ridiculous. And so that has caused significant delay. Because if we would have gone with the original opinions that the woman was fit to stand trial and there was no intervention, alleged intervention from the health minister who decides the fate of all these district psychiatrists, it's very hard to say no to the minister in charge of where you're working. That really caused a delay. And if he is found, if he is indicted and tried, then we need to see justice done through the whole way. If he did do this, he should also face the music for what he did, because it's absolutely, it's criminal.
Okay, we have to say alleged crimes.
I said alleged.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving on to a question to Dassi. You and your sisters, this is the questions from, can't see really, I'm sorry, I can't see really the person, Viviv. Dassi and her sisters have managed to get well-deserved worldwide Jewish support. Dassi, do you think that the incredible support of your case could have been achieved without the non-Jewish politicians who that actually told you that from the beginning that they will support you? Microphone.
Is the question, do I think that it couldn't have been achieved?
No. The question is that they say this is a statement that's saying that you got a lot of support from a non-Jewish politician. And the question is, do you think that without their support, would you go so far as you came?
I think it's been a joint effort between the Jewish and non-Jewish politicians and the Jewish and wider Australian community that has raised the awareness about this case. I can't pinpoint which point or who was the cause of creating such a high-profile case. It's been a joint effort from my sisters and myself and the community and from the government to raise awareness about this case.
Okay. There's a question here from Suzanne. She asked, has Malka been teaching in schools in Israel since she came back? As we know, she came back, she's been in Israel from 2008. So has she been teaching? Do we know anything about it? So one of you, doesn't matter.
So I was aware in 2008 when she left to go to Israel, we were getting reports that she was teaching in Bnei Brak in a kinder. And the Adass community here, the one that paid for her tickets to go to Australia, to go to Israel, promised us that they were keeping tabs on her. They were going to make sure that she wasn't going to teach anywhere, and that they were calling up other schools and ensuring that, that she wasn't getting a job. So apparently they did do that. They were calling up schools. She was teaching, but she was basically chased out of Bnei Brak where she was living, and that's why she ended up in Emmanuel, because she knew that that community would protect her. So she, and that's where she, I believe she got into some kind of mentorship role in Emmanuel.
Okay. There's another question to Dassi here, saying...
I just wanted to add one thing to what Dassi said, which is, this process of me helping Dassi and her sisters has made us discover lots of different things about Israeli law. So one thing we discovered was that women don't need a background check to be educators or kindergarten teachers, whereas men do, which is, discriminatory to men. And I think it has to be everybody, not just men, but women. So that's something else we need to fix in the law so that these things don't happen.
Okay. Abigail is asking, interesting question. I think maybe, Fleur, if you start. Let's say all the appeals are gone. She's fit to extradite to Australia. How long? What is the time to see her here in Australia?
From what I understand, could be a couple of weeks. Dassi, do you know anything different?
We were told best case scenario, end of this year, but nothing has ever been best case scenario in this case. So we're not holding out for it. But like everyone knows, appeals take time, and extradition takes time, and court hearings happen once a month, not one after another like they do here in Australia. So best case scenario, by the end of this year, we're hoping.
Well, of course, appeals and everything can take, like you said, it can take time. Okay, so we're moving on to our next question. Yuda is asking, does Leifer he's asking if she has the option to serve the sentence in Israel if she's convicted. The question, I think, Fleur, if you want to answer.
Sorry, what was that?
The question was, if she's convicted, does she have the right to serve in prison in Israel?
I don't know. I really don't know. That's a great question. I'm assuming that once you're extradited, you serve your sentence in the place where you committed the crime, but maybe she can appeal because her family's here. Maybe there is a way that she can appeal to actually serve a sentence in Israel. I wouldn't be surprised, but I really don't know. I'd have to check.
So I can say that where I checked, one of the rules, one of the sections of the agreement is that she has to have the option. So the answer is yes, according to the law, that yes, Yigal, she can, if she wants, it's her option, she can serve her time in prison in Israel, but she has to be extradited to Australia. We're coming very close to the end of it, and there's so many questions. So Julie is asking a question here, Dassi. It's up to you if you want to answer. Dassi, how do you feel about testifying in court when the days come? Microphone.
I'm ready to testify in court. I know that's, sometimes I feel like the hardest part has been getting Malka Leifer here, but I'm aware that the hardest part is still, ahead of me, and that's testifying in court, but I'm ready to do that.
Wow. And your sisters as well?
We're all ready.
You're ready. Okay. David Moses is asking, Fleur, going back to you, this is maybe a personal question, going back to your, when you were born and before you came to Israel, do you have any memory of the JNF. Was JNF any memory of yours growing up?
Yes, and my father was on the local board. I think most Jews in the diaspora have very warm recollections and feelings about the JNF as our arm to settle the country and to build our beautiful forests and to develop the state of Israel. So my father, I think, was the head of the board in Gibraltar of the JNF, small, of course, chapter. And I lived in London for a while. So yes, of course, I think that the JNF is kind of every diaspora Jew's organization that to them represents the building and the development of the state of Israel.
Thank you. Before I will thank you, is it something that you want to say? Something you want to say to the hundreds of people watching you now? Each one of you can speak.
I just want to say what Dassi won't say, and that is that it takes brave women like Dassi and her sisters not only to face their own demons of what happened to them, but to come across the other side of the world, campaign in order to bring justice, and at no point become bitter about Israel, and at no point blame Israel for what's happening, but very focused on the particular system and the process that sometimes was letting them down. And I think that takes both courage, strength, but also real sensitivity and intelligence. So from my perspective, I've been honored to get to know them, to work with them, and to help them in any way that I can.
Dassi, you want to say something?
Oh, thank you so much, Fleur. That was so nice of you. But I mean, all I want to say is, I get a lot of messages from people, and I appreciate every single one of them. And I don't always have time to respond, but when, things get overwhelming and we've had a particularly hard day, I'll sit there and scroll through the messages and read those words of support, and they mean so much to me. And every single person that I've met along this journey, from Fleur to other people in Israel, I'm so grateful to have those people in my life.
Okay, well, I would like to thank our guest panelists for their openness, expertise, and informative commentary. I want to say as well, as an Israeli, with my heart here in both places, I have followed this story closely. I firmly believe that Israel is one of the leading countries when it comes to human rights and ensuring justice is served. I have no doubt that this will be the case here as well. We as Zionists are very proud of Israel, and our support is unwavering. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we look forward to our next JNF Connect webinar with Australian Chief Scientist, Dr. Alan Finkel, on Thursday, 11th of June at 2 p.m. Good night, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night.